Most men don't want power. They don't want to dominate, control, or manipulate. They want peace. They want clarity. They want to stop waking up with that ache in their chest, that quiet suspicion that they misread everything again, that maybe the smile wasn't real, that maybe the attention wasn't connection, that maybe, once again, what they thought was intimacy was just performance. This isn't a video about how to win against women. This is about how to see, not her, you. Because every woman you misread was a mirror, reflecting your own confusion back at you. There's a silent fatigue that comes from always having to guess, from giving the benefit of the doubt while your gut screams that something's off, from over-explaining yourself to someone who already decided not to understand, and then blaming yourself for why it failed. Again, you're not broken. You were trained by silence, by absence, by misplaced loyalty, to keep choosing women who never chose you back with the same weight. You stayed because you believed, because you saw potential, because you thought that if you loved harder, she'd see the man in front of her, but she didn't. And that's not your shame. That's your awakening. Zeno of Citium didn't create Stoicism in theory. He built it with his feet in the dust, among people, watching human nature unfold, not from a mountain, but from the square, the chaos, the longing, the quiet disappointments we pretend don't sting. This video starts there too, not with ideas, but with the bruises men carry silently. It isn't about catching a woman's tells or reading her like a game. It's about seeing through the noise and stopping the lie you've been living, that if you just do enough, say enough, love enough, she'll stay. But you already know the truth. She stayed as long as she needed to, not as long as you deserved. Seneca said it without apology. He who is too quick to trust suffers twice. And for most men, the first wound wasn't betrayal. It was misinterpretation. You thought her silence meant safety. You thought her chaos was passion. You thought her attention was investment, but it was always something else. Something passing, something hollow. And it's not that she fooled you. It's that you didn't stop long enough to see what was missing, because you didn't want to see it. This isn't about exposing her weakness. This is about confronting the part of you that couldn't recognize it, that didn't want to. Her weakness is not leverage. It's revelation. If you can look at it clearly, without flinching, without fantasizing, without excusing, you'll start seeing with masculine vision again. You'll stop overreaching. You'll stop breaking yourself to decode mixed signals. You'll stop making gods out of women who never learned how to love without needing to be worshipped. This is where it begins, not with control, but with contrast. The ability to watch instead of chase, to remain instead of react, to say nothing and still know everything you need to know. That's not manipulation. That's discernment. That's what this is about, not her power. Yours, and how quietly it returns when you stop asking the wrong questions. There's a moment most men never test, a pause, a retreat, a decision to stop pursuing, not in bitterness, not in revenge, but in clarity. And in that silence, something ancient reveals itself. You see her, not the version that performs under attention, but the one that emerges when there's nothing left to mirror her. The real her, no effort, no stage, just reaction. That's when the truth arrives. Because a woman's deepest patterns don't surface in conflict. They show up in your absence. Not when you argue, but when you stop explaining. Not when you fight, but when you go quiet. You'll notice something shift. Some women, when the pursuit stops, vanish. Not because they're evil, but because they were never present. They were only performing. The applause stops, and so does their interest. Others will test the silence, poke it, mock it, resent it, because they can't stand the lack of control. And a rare few, they hold it, they meet it, they reflect it. And in that stillness, you find a woman who's not just reacting, but revealing. You're not testing her, you're calibrating the dynamic. You're stepping back to see what steps toward you. Masculine discernment isn't loud. It doesn't announce boundaries. It just stops overreaching. It stops filling dead space with explanations. It stops begging through attention. When you withdraw with calm, not with anger, you see which women need your movement to feel alive. That's the tell. Not her words, but her equilibrium. Can she hold herself without your effort? Can she remain respectful in the absence of reward? Or does the mask crack when you stop feeding it? This shift isn't dramatic, it's subtle. You cancel a plan without guilt. You reply slower. You stop volunteering your soul like an offering. And then you watch. No blame, no performance, just stillness. And in that stillness, the real woman begins to emerge, not the curated version, but the instinctive one. That's where her nature lives. Not in what she says when things are good, but in how she behaves when you stop trying to impress her. Control yourself, and you'll start seeing her. Not the surface, the center. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's not a loss. That's the beginning of masculine vision. Some men think they've found intimacy when all they've found is exposure, a flood of emotion, stories from her past, tears on the first night, confessions that sound like depth, but feel like drowning. It looks like vulnerability. It feels like connection, but it's not. It's instability dressed in performance. And it ruins men because they confuse chaos for closeness. They see emotional urgency and mistake it for emotional truth. But a woman who overshares before safety isn't inviting you in. She's throwing herself forward so you won't notice how fractured she is inside. There's a difference between being open and being porous. One is grounded, the other is leaking. And when a woman leaks her past into your lap without asking if your lap can hold it, you're not bonding. You're being baited into caretaking, into fixing, into feeling like you're finally being trusted, when really you're being drafted into her unhealed war. And if you're a man who grew up proving his worth through emotional labor, it'll feel familiar. It'll feel like home, but it's not. It's a shortcut to losing yourself in someone else's chaos. Watch how she holds silence. That's the test. Not how fast she tells you everything, but how well she respects the empty spaces, the moments where no one is performing, where nothing is being confessed, where it's just you, her, and the tension of not filling the void. Can she be still? Can she breathe without needing your reaction to feel real? That's where stability lives. Not in emotional fireworks, but in her ability to sit with stillness and not collapse into it. Trauma bonding feels like intimacy because it's intense, but intensity is not depth. It's urgency, and urgency isn't safe. It's seductive. It pulls you in with speed and sympathy, then anchors you in her storm. A woman who needs chaos will seek out calm men just to test if they'll abandon their peace to join her. And most men do, not because they're weak, but because they're lonely. Because being needed feels like love when you've never been seen. Hold your stillness. Don't rush to fix. Don't offer comfort too quickly. Let her prove that her vulnerability is real, not rehearsed. If she can sit with silence, if she can hold your calm without turning it into a stage, then you may have found someone who's not escaping herself through you. But if she floods you with broken history and calls it connection, walk gently, but walk. Not to punish her, but to protect yourself, because your peace is not a project, and your empathy is not a cage. Watch how she focuses, not on you, not just on conversations, but on life itself. How she holds attention is how she holds emotion. It's how she holds herself, a woman who cannot sit with boredom, who must fill every pause with noise, novelty, or validation, is not just restless. She's emotionally unsustainable. She's not building a bond. She's chasing a stimulus, and eventually, she will need you to become that stimulus, every day, every moment, until your presence becomes her distraction, and your exhaustion becomes her complaint. Stillness is a test most relationships fail before they begin. Can she stay present without being entertained? Can she be in the room without needing the spotlight? Can she ask a question and actually stay to hear the answer? Or does her mind drift the moment you stop reflecting her? Attention isn't about intelligence, it's about intention. And a woman who cannot focus on work, on growth, on silence, will not be able to focus on you, not truly, not when it matters. She'll love the idea of connection, but avoid the substance of it. Because connection requires pause. It requires discomfort. It requires moments where nothing is happening, and yet everything is deepening. That's when real intimacy forms, in the slow minutes, in the quiet meals, in the ordinary days. Not every woman can handle those moments. Some will mistake them for disinterest, others for rejection, because they only feel alive when something is being chased, or when someone is chasing them. Masculine stillness becomes a mirror in these moments. If she's unsettled by your calm, if she needs to provoke just to feel the spark again, it's not love she's after. It's distraction from herself, and you will become the drug, the cycle, the high she reaches for, and the blame she throws when the high fades. It won't matter how much you care. It won't matter how deeply you show up. If she can't sit with herself, she will never be able to sit with you. not in peace, not in truth. You don't need a woman who's always impressed. You need one who's present, one who doesn't need chaos to feel connection, one who can be still. Not because she's bored, but because she's whole. And if she can't be still, if she needs constant movement, then it's not your job to keep up. It's your signal to slow down, to observe, to step back before her restlessness becomes your responsibility. Because love is not adrenaline. It's attention, sustained, quiet, undivided. And that's a discipline few speak of, but every man needs to see. Some women learn early that their beauty buys silence, that charm forgives chaos, that if they sparkle brightly enough, no one will ask them to stand. And for too long, too many men have mistaken that sparkle for substance. They confuse aesthetic with character. They see grace in her posture and assume it lives in her soul. But charm, without accountability, is not a gift. It's a shield. And the more powerful it is, the more dangerous it becomes, because even she may not realize she's using it. The most fragile kind of woman is the one who doesn't know who she is beyond how others react to her. Her smile becomes her currency. Her presence becomes her performance. And when she's adored, she feels whole. But the moment admiration fades, even for a second, so does her stability. She'll disappear, not out of cruelty, but because she was never standing on anything solid to begin with. Just reflections, just applause, just your hunger holding up her worth. Pay attention to what happens after the compliments stop. After the effort slows, does she grow cold? Does she become dismissive? Does she quietly punish you for no longer orbiting her? Or does she remain grounded, curious, human? That difference is everything. A woman who lives for being admired will need to be chased forever. And when you finally stop running, you'll realize she was never walking beside you, just posing, just reflecting back the image she thought would keep her safe. There's no shame in beauty, but beauty without truth becomes manipulation. And manipulation without awareness becomes emptiness. You'll feel it. That hollow weight in your chest after another perfect night. The conversations that feel full, but leave you emptier. The intimacy that flickers but never warms. It's not her fault, but it's not your burden to carry. Because if you fall for the mask, you'll keep trying to fix a woman who's never shown you the structure underneath. You'll chase clarity from someone who only knows how to seduce confusion. Ask yourself one question. Does her presence stabilize you or drain you? Not in moments of passion, but in stillness, in routine, in silence. Because real strength doesn't dazzle, it endures. And a woman who has nothing behind her charm will always need you to keep validating the illusion. But once you stop needing the performance, you'll start seeing the person. And if there's no one there, it's not your job to build her. It's your responsibility to leave, gently, quietly, without apology, because your peace deserves more than decoration. It deserves depth. Every man meets this moment, not with shouting, not with open disrespect, but with a slow, subtle pressure. A request that feels harmless, a compromise that feels small, a shift in tone that makes you question whether saying no will cost you the connection. And this is where most men fold, not because they're weak, but because they've been taught that peace is kept by pleasing. That love means flexibility, that softness means surrender. But every time you bend your boundary to keep her comfort intact, you lose a piece of yourself, and she feels it, even if she doesn't say it. Women test boundaries not out of malice, but out of instinct, to know if the ground beneath them will hold, to see if the man they're standing with can still stand when it's inconvenient. And in that test, her weakness may show itself, not just in how she pushes, but in how she reacts when you don't move. If she punishes your firmness, withdraws affection, manipulates with silence or guilt, then what she fears isn't your rigidity, it's your strength. Because strength exposes her limits. It reflects where she cannot lead. And some women don't want to be held. They want to hold control. When you say no, you're not creating distance. You're creating definition. And that definition draws out truth. Some women will lean into it, find safety in your structure, feel seen by your steadiness. Others will fight it, not because you're wrong, but because they never learned how to exist inside boundaries without feeling small. That's her story, but it doesn't need to become your compromise. Because the moment you start softening your standards to keep her calm, you stop being a man she can respect. There's a line that should never move: your center, your principles. your sense of what's right even when it costs you affection. That's the test. And it's not about pride. It's about peace. Marcus Aurelius said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." If your boundary creates tension, good. That tension will reveal her, not just her reaction, but her relationship to masculine structure. Some will rise, some will retreat, some will rebel, but in all of it, you'll see the truth. You're not here to control. You're here to contain, and that requires standing still when everything in her tone, body, or silence tries to make you move. If you do, you lose not just her respect, but your own. But if you hold, if you remain calm, firm, unshaken, then even if she walks away, you'll remain whole. Because a man who protects his boundary protects his peace, and a man who protects his peace becomes someone a woman cannot shape, but must meet, as she is, or not at all. Respect doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself in compliments or declarations. It shows up in rhythm, in pauses, in how a woman listens when you speak, not just with her ears but with her posture, her tone, her silence. Some men spend years with women who never respected them, and only realize it in hindsight, when they remember how often they were interrupted, corrected, dismissed under the disguise of teasing. Respect isn't a word, it's a frequency, and if you listen closely, her language will tell you everything she believes about your presence. A woman who respects you softens, not in submission, in alignment. Her voice slows, her body calms, her energy listens. You'll feel it, not as admiration, but as space. She gives you room to think, room to finish, room to exist without having to constantly prove why you matter. And the opposite is just as true. The woman who cuts your sentences short, who speaks over your quiet, who competes with your calm, that's not strength, that's resistance. Not to you, but to everything your steadiness represents. Some women carry a reflexive need to challenge masculine presence, not because they're cruel, but because they've only seen men as threats or tools, never as mirrors, never as equals. And in that challenge, you'll hear it. The friction in her voice, the edge in her questions, the passive jabs that seem small but cut deep. She may not even notice she's doing it, but your body will. You'll start shrinking in the silence, doubting your thoughts before you speak them. That's not love. That's erosion. There's a pattern in her language, in the words she uses when she's angry, in how she phrases disagreement, in whether her curiosity becomes interrogation. And if you're not paying attention, you'll justify it. You'll say she's passionate. You'll say she just speaks her mind. But passion without reverence is noise, and a woman who constantly challenges your emotional authority is not building with you. She's battling you, and eventually, you'll either become her opponent or you'll become invisible. Pay attention to her rhythm, not just what she says, but how she says it. Does she look for understanding or for leverage? Does she listen to learn or to correct? Language never lies, and if her language makes you feel smaller over time, it's not your ego, it's your intuition. Respect doesn't feel like submission, it feels like safety. It feels like breath, like stillness that doesn't need to be defended. And if her language can't meet you there, then she's not hearing you. She's managing you. And that is not love. That is control wrapped in conversation. Quiet, calculated, unspoken, until one day you stop speaking, and that silence says everything. There are women who vanish in silence, not physically, but emotionally. The moment no one is looking, they unravel. Their worth, their certainty, their mood, it all depends on being seen, not deeply, just constantly. And when that spotlight dims, so does their stability. These are the women who mistake being unmirrored for being unloved, who can't tell the difference between solitude and rejection, who chase validation not because they want connection, but because they fear invisibility more than anything else. You'll notice it in small moments, the way she scans a room, the way she needs to be noticed even when it's not about her, the way she starts conversations she doesn't finish, just to feel the spark of being heard. It's not confidence, it's dependency masked in charisma. A woman who can't sit alone with herself will never truly sit with you, because she's not with you. She's with the version of herself that only exists when someone is watching, and when your attention fades even briefly, she'll look elsewhere. Not out of cruelty, but out of survival, because the silence feels like death to her. Zeno taught that clarity begins when the desire for applause fades. That's not just about ego, it's about identity. A woman who knows who she is doesn't panic in quiet rooms. She doesn't need to be reminded that she matters. She doesn't weaponize absence. She rests in it. She breathes in it, because her worth isn't on lease from someone else's gaze. But if her energy collapses every time your focus shifts, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance, and the role you've been cast in is exhausting. This isn't judgment. It's foresight. It's the realization that you cannot build something lasting with someone who needs constant reflection to feel real, because eventually you'll run out of praise, of patience, of energy. And when you do, she won't ask what changed. She'll accuse you of withholding, of shrinking, of failing her, and you'll start to believe it. You'll forget that you're allowed to be quiet, to turn inward, to exist without applause, that your presence isn't a spotlight. It's a boundary, and not everyone is ready to stand in it without disappearing. If her sense of self depends on being seen, she will never truly see you. Not in stillness, not in struggle, not in truth. And the man you become in that dynamic will slowly dissolve, until all that's left is a reflection of what she needs, not who you are. Walk if you must, not in anger, in remembrance, because your identity deserves more than to be absorbed. It deserves to be met. And if her weakness is that she cannot be without eyes on her, then your strength must be in knowing when to close yours and leave, silently, without ceremony, just peace. Her weakness isn't yours to expose. It's not a weapon. It's not a victory. It's a mirror. And if you're strong enough to face it without needing to exploit it, you'll begin to see what you couldn't before. That every moment you tolerated confusion, over-explained your silence, or gave energy to chaos was never about her. It was about your refusal to see what you didn't want to accept, not because you were blind, but because you still believed the pain was worth it. That staying meant strength, that loving harder might heal what was already broken. But Zeno knew the truth. Strength is not found in reaction. It's found in restraint, in observation, in the ability to stand in a crowded square and listen, not to the noise, but to your own internal compass. That voice you abandoned too many times just to keep someone else from leaving. But she left anyway, or maybe she stayed, and you left yourself. Either way, the cost was the same, your clarity, and now you want it back. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So ask yourself, what color has your soul been absorbing? Was it the constant correction, the dismissal wrapped in charm, the silence that wasn't peaceful, but punishing? You've been soaking in someone else's instability and calling it love. But love doesn't unmake a man. It doesn't turn calm into confusion. It doesn't require you to disappear just to keep the peace. Imagine this, a man standing in a mirror maze, each reflection a different reaction. One woman admires him, another mocks him, one walks toward him, one vanishes. But the path forward isn't through the mirrors. It's through what he finally stops tolerating, what he no longer justifies, what he quietly walks away from, not to prove anything, but to find something, himself. You don't need to expose her weakness. You don't need to fix her pain. You don't need to keep staying in rooms where your silence is unwelcome. You just need to see what her behavior reveals about your own blindness. And once you see that, fully, without flinching, you won't argue. You won't beg. You won't chase. You'll just walk, calm, clear, whole again. Not because she changed, but because you remembered who you are. And finally, chose him.